Okay, so I've got the menu system up and running here, and basically this is just a rough run through of the menus, so you can have you can see a proper idea of what's on offer. So we've got the image size. You can have there the full 42 megapixel, 18 megapixel, or 11. Now I don't think it's just as simple as having 18 megapixel or 11. Should you want to say save space on your card, because I think what that does is actually crops it down. So 42 megapixel is the full frame, and then to utilize just 18 megapixels, it then sort of centers on 18 megapixels of the sensor and therefore crops it. So I think maybe just thinking sort of like a 10mm lens, for example, probably no such thing, but 10mm lens would become something like 16mm. You know, so just be aware of that. That I was actually hoping that they've magically found some way of just being able to sort of crop down to 18 megapixels, just so I could utilize the 42 megapixels when I need it, but not chew up all my card space. That would be great, but I guess not. So aspect ratio, I think we've got 3:2 and 16:9. Yeah, so if you want to do wide, you know, and see real time what the wide aspect is going to look like, then you know, you can do that. For me personally, I think if you just edit in the photos later, you can just choose 16:9 in the edit anyway. So probably a bit better, because then you've got a little bit more leeway if you did want to go for 3:2 with that image. Quality. So we're going to have, I always shoot in RAW and JPEG. It will actually turn off some of the features with this camera. So, for example, I think on my RX1R, I tried to do some like funky color effects one day with it, just playing about when I'd first got it, and because I was in RAW mode, I had no chance. Basically, not allowed. It doesn't allow you to do it. Here in the, I guess, the video side of it, we've got quite a few: 4K HD, AVC HD, MP4. And I believe there's quite a few good settings for that. I honestly don't know a lot about video at this point in time, so I'm not going to go through all that really. I mean, here's, you know, a few screenshots of what it looks like. You can choose your 25p and all that stuff. Dual video record and drive mode. I honestly don't know what some of these things are. So flash, it's not got a flash built into the actual camera. The RX1R has that, and just occasionally that's a really great little thing. So I'm hoping to find myself a tiny little flash somehow, because that would be great to just stick that on the hot shoe, and you know, it's you know, that'd be good to have it just if you've got a backlit scene and your subject and you just want to sort of light the front of the subject just a little bit. You know, it'd be great to have that, because as you can see, you've got flash compensation, so you just power that up or down and it just helps a little bit. Focus area, this is when we're coming into sort of all the focusing now. So we've got wide aspect, so that's zone focusing, so you can do tracking and things like that. Center is pretty much what I'm going to use, or maybe flexible spot. You know, like I say, I enjoy just the single point. I don't need all these hundreds of points, but maybe at some point. I mean, I'm hoping to take pictures of well, the Grand Prix that's coming up soon actually, and maybe for that, for tracking the cars, that will come in handy. But it's only going to be for fast action things for me. It can be used for portraits as well, but you'll probably know all that if you're looking at this camera anyway. I've just come out of the menu there by mistake. Right, so focus settings, we've got AF, let's see what that is. So yeah, so that's where you choose all your points. AF illuminator, so if it's a dark situation and you're struggling to focus on somebody, then you will basically choose the AF illuminator to auto. If you don't want it to come on, say you're in sort of a quiet place, you're not going to want that to come on. You know, maybe if you're in, I don't know, a church or something like that, or just some kind of environment where you don't want a big light on the front of the camera to go off every time you press the shutter button to light up the subject. It's probably not a good idea to have it. You can see there a couple of things are turned off. I don't know if that's because I'm in RAW or because I just haven't selected those particular autofocus modes. exposure compensation. So, you know, if you're in aperture priority, you can choose that, but actually you would just use that dial really, much quicker. You're not going to go through a menu to go and find that. That's a bit strange. So, and exposure steps, I guess that relates to this exposure compensation in the menu, because here it is in 0.3 EV anyway. When you go like that, it's minus 0.3, minus 0.6, and then minus 1. Yes, I know I'm not a mathematician, so it's probably 0.330 or whatever. Back to 0. So, you know, just always be aware of that. I mean, going into that, actually, it's quite a nice firm one. Some are very, very firm, so you can't knock them by mistake. This is not. It's not quite there. You could possibly hit that by mistake, but it's not too bad. It's quite nice and firm. Right, then we've got what we've got. So all your ISO settings now, I believe in this camera, which minimum shutter speed, yes, this is the first Sony camera as far as I know, or certainly the first of the A7 series, that allows you to actually use auto ISO, but choose how little, the slowest shutter speed. Now on the RX1R, it's only a firmware update away, but they've just never released the firmware update. Basically, you would choose auto ISO. You can tell the camera whether you want to go to sort of up to, I think it's sort of up to say 3200 ISO. That's fine, from 100 to 3200, and the camera will auto choose. But you've got no real control over the shutter speed. So sometimes it would actually, I think it will only go down to about a 60th. Now that camera has a 35mm lens. On a really bright day, there's no reason why you couldn't be shooting around 30th, no problem at all. So, you know, this camera, I believe you can sort of choose here, sort of, we want to go down to a minimum of say a 30th, and ISO, we can set all that up as well, going into minimum ISO, maximum ISO, so that's where we'd say choose 3200. And now, going off those settings, if I was to take a picture in any kind of circumstances, the camera will try and stick to between 100 and 3200 ISO, and try and stick to no less than or no more than a 30th of a second. However it computes it, you know, it's not as good as sort of choosing everything yourself, but if you don't want to miss that shot, sometimes ISO on auto is actually a really cool thing nowadays. Didn't used to work, seems to be pretty good now. Metering mode, you've got the usual multi-metering, central weighted, and also spot metering. I tend to use spot, so I'll set that to that. White balance, auto, you know, I'm going to use that on auto maybe, but I'll probably use daylight for the most part when I'm out and about. Even if it's cloudy, I tend to use daylight as well. Dynamic range and auto HDR. Now, with this camera, it has a huge amount of dynamic range apparently. It's something like 14 stops, which is similar to the RX1R that I've got. Basically, if you underexpose or overexpose an image and you're not massively far out, you don't need HDR on these cameras. They are pretty unbelievable. There's rumours that the next camera, the A7000, which is the APS-C size camera, that's going to have HDR built into the chip, which will actually mean that you can you'll be able to sort of have something like 15 or 16 stops of light between dark to light. I mean, that's just crazy, and I find in some ways it's really good, but in some ways it can go a bit too far. You can actually end up flattening the image a bit too much, and then you have to edit it more to make it look sort of contrasty again. So it's a great thing. Yeah, I don't know what's happened there. Cancel that. So it's a great thing, but it's not, you know, I think we've gone so far now in 2015 that I don't actually know if we need to go any further than that. Creative style, stuff like that, so you've got standard, vivid, neutral. This is just how your image is going to come out of the camera in the JPEG and the RAW. You might want to drop things like sharpness down and stuff like that, and then just bring that back up in editing. Excuse me. So that's your choice. It depends on how you deal with your images after the fact. Picture effects, that's only available in JPEG, I would expect, so that's why it's not letting me in there, but I'm not going to use that anyway. You just have to mess around with it. Picture profiles, I guess that's where you just set up your own settings. Focus magnifier, so when you're focusing on this, you have focus magnification, and you also have focus peaking. It's just to help you with manual focusing. Again, back to something like a manual lens like the Voigtlander here, which doesn't have any autofocus capabilities. You know, you sort of need to be able to either zoom in on the subject ideally, or you know, or use focus peaking. But focus peaking on previous cameras, it can be a bit inaccurate. You know, if you're looking for like super accuracy on somebody's eye for a portrait shot, something like that, you're probably better off with the magnification. But maybe this camera improves on that, who knows. All that usual stuff, isn't it? Face detection, smile detection, so that would be good if you're taking family shots, or even if you're doing maybe a bit of street photography. It'd be good if it picks up on faces, because then it sort of tends to focus them a lot better. Soft skin effects, stuff like that. I mean, this is not a pro level camera when you see things like that, but it's, to some people maybe will like it. If you've got loads of wrinkles, maybe it smooths them out, I don't know. Got steady shot, we've got steady shot settings there, so we can actually choose the focal length. Now that's really good. So say I put this camera on, this lens on, this 12mm lens, I can actually tell the camera that I've got a 12mm lens on there, because obviously the camera's not going to know. It doesn't have any contacts, so it doesn't have any sort of contacts whatsoever for anything like this, so the camera doesn't have a clue what's on the front of it. So basically I can tell the camera, oh, it's alright, we've got a 12mm camera, a 12mm lens on there. If I go to there, and now basically if I was using that lens on this camera, I don't need to worry so much about the steady shot, although at 12mm you never really even need to worry about steady shot. It's more for the higher end, like if it was at say 150mm or something like that. That's when you're going to introduce shake and actually need the steady shot more, depending on lighting obviously. Colour space, I usually use Adobe RGB because I'll bring things into Lightroom or whatever. Auto slow shutter, don't know, something to do with movies by the looks of it. And audio recording, we've got all these things like wind noise reduction, so that's good. It's all for you. Levels, if you've got microphones plugged in, things like that. So you know, it is quite a featured video camera as well. I mean, you've got Zebra as well, so, or Zebra, and basically that shows when you really sort of getting things wrong in video, which I probably will quite utilise that. Manual focus assist, you can choose the amount of time. They've done it again where it's only 2 seconds or 5 seconds or no limit. It would be nice that it's quicker than that, because you're kind of waiting for the 2 seconds to finish before it comes back to the main image. So imagine you set up your landscape scene and you've got something in there that's not going to be in there long in the shot, and you zoom in and suddenly you've got to wait 2 seconds before it comes back to the actual full image. Grid lines, I usually use the rule of thirds. I like the rule of thirds. So I don't know what marker display and marker settings are, I'm sorry. Audio level, so again this is all down to, there's quite a lot of mixed video and sort of stills stuff within the menu. It's not, I wouldn't say it's particularly brilliantly laid out. Auto review, you can choose what, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Leave it on 2 seconds maybe. It's good through the viewfinder. Display button, and what's that? So that allows you to choose between the monitor and the viewfinder. It has got, you can see there, a magic eye or whatever it's called, because it basically just turns the screen off as soon as you put your eye up to the viewfinder. Peaking level, I believe mid is pretty good, and I usually go for sort of yellow, but it's subjective that. I mean, you could be taking a picture of something yellow and then you need it to be red. I always wish that you could just quite easily set things like that, and I don't think you always can. Live view display content. So this is, again, there's things switched off here which I can't do, but that will be down to the autofocus setting that I've put on. Finder and Monitor Auto, Viewfinder Manual. So that's where you'd choose whether you want it to be on the viewfinder or on the screen. Release without lens, you wouldn't normally want that, but with this camera, because you're possibly going to use adapters, again back to this adapter, if you don't have that enabled, you can't take a picture because it doesn't know there's a lens on there. So you've got to enable that feature, and then you can put this on. Release without card. Now I would always say disable that, because you don't want to go taking some pictures and think it's saved it to a memory card and then realise, oh, I've left my memory card out of the camera. It happened to me once. It's probably not going to happen a lot, but you know, why bother having that setting there? It's more for sort of demoing it in a shop really than anything else. I don't know what that is, so I'll have to look into that. Priority setting, autofocus, single or continuous. Balanced emphasis. So it'll be something to do with the shutter button perhaps. A few autofocus settings without the shutter. Silent shooting. Now that's something that I'm looking forward to, because basically silent shooting, it's gonna, well in fact no, the electric front curtain shutter there, it's things like this. It's an electronic shutter in this camera, so whereas it used to in the other models it's just a clunk clunk shutter, you know, it just makes a noise, you can actually with this camera shoot silently, so it doesn't make any noise. But the only thing is, and I'm yet to see obviously if it makes too much difference in editing, but when you use the normal shutter, the regular sort of curtain shutter, you get 14 bits to your raw file, and when you use your electronic shutter apparently you get I think 12 bits. So how much 2 bits make, I don't know if there's any major difference, but maybe there is, I don't know. So that's certainly something, you know, to explore, and it'll be great, you know, if you're in say a wedding and you're shooting pictures, you don't want to hear clunk clunk every time you take the picture. That's not going to be ideal, is it? We've got exposure compensation can be set for ambient, which is just the general lighting, and the flash as well if you've got one on there. Face registration, so you can actually register face on it. I've never found that to be too accurate, but maybe it is with this. So yeah, so Super 35, so that'll be to do with video. Video light modes. You got a lot of settings again. Video. I'm mostly just showing you these because you probably know more than me about it. You're welcome to educate me in the bottom of the video. And yeah, you've got locks on wheels so you don't go hitting anything by mistake. Now we're into the Wi-Fi and NFC. So you've got one touch NFC. Again, I don't know if that will apply to me, but you'd have to set that up probably on the phone as well. Application list, so you can actually download applications from the Play Memory Store, things like what is it, time lapse. Great, you can download it, but I've just paid £2,600 for a camera, and I've got to pay £8 for another application, and then there's another application that goes on top of that for another £8. Thank you, Sony. Usual thing, isn't it? All your play options, and then finally we've got sort of all the actual camera settings. So we've got all the brightness settings. Sorry, I'm rushing, by the way. That my camera that's recording this has only got about another minute to record. Hopefully you'll see these sort of settings. Cleaning mode, so you can clean the sensor. USB types of connections, probably won't use that to be honest. Copyright info, so you can put all your details on the actual images you shoot. And the version, so that when hopefully there are firmware updates for added features and any issues that to be resolved, you'll be able to go into that. You'll see we've got version 1.00 on this camera at the moment, on a A7R II, and you know, you can hopefully just see if you need to upgrade or not. I hope this has been enlightening. I'm certainly looking forward to using the camera, and I will get some more videos up. Like I say, I'm going to compare it in size to some of my other cameras, so that helps you choose you know, if it's going to be the camera for you. And please just comment, like my videos, thumbs up and all that sort of stuff, because it's going to really help me get this you know, channel off the ground and really give me the enticement to do more videos for you. Alright, thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.